Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. All over in all sorts of political discussions and in different discussions about economics, many people will make the argument that consumption is the driver of the economy, which is a terrible notion, and it often justifies government involvement and redistribution from people who don't spend as much on consuming goods and to people who spend more on goods, and say that's good for the economy because these people will spend more, so then the economy will be better off because people will spend and that'll circulate through the economy. This is a terrible way of thinking about economics and a terrible method for designing a society around. The proper method is to think about production as the driver of an economy, because without production you cannot have consumption. That will never work. There's nothing to consume if you don't have producers. And second, every single act of consumption, this is something that Yaron Brook says a lot, requires two acts of production. First, you need the production of the good that's being consumed. Second, you need the production by the consumer who had to produce something in order to get the money to use in consumption. So ultimately, production drives every act of consumption. Every act of consumption needs two acts of production to take place before it can even possibly happen. So yeah, wealth does not come by consuming stuff. You need to be able to produce. Consumption's destruction. Consumption, when you consume something, it's most of the time it's destroyed. When you eat something, it's gone. You can invest in stuff. That's not consumption, though. That's more production. You invest in something and more stuff gets produced. And that's how wealth is created, and that's how societies advance. And that's how economies are driven. Production, innovation, all that stuff. It's just the idea of creating more. And that is essentially what drives the economy and what drives societies toward prosperity. And production is made possible by the human mind. The ability of a man to think rationally and freely of intervention, of force. Because force stifles the mind. It tells it what it can and can't think. But the mind has a limitless capacity for innovation, for creativity. So ultimately, any sort of government redistribution or restriction on the ability of the human mind to produce and take the rewards of its actions too, because you need some incentive to produce. But without that, production is lessened, and the overall society is much worse off. That's not even getting to the moral question of this. This is just the basic economic facts. But the moral question is, does the government have the right to try to drive an economy, to try to make people consume more, to try to influence people's decisions, which is ultimately what most people who argue the idea that economics is driven by consumption, that's ultimately what most of them want to do, is redistribute from some people to other people. But that is a very, very immoral idea. People deserve the products of their actions. That's what politics is about. It's about protecting rights. It's ensuring that people can maintain their property, because without that, there's no incentive to work. There's no benefits to your actions either. It's a terrible, terrible policy by the government to redistribute or to restrict the mind in any way economically. The only role of the government should be preventing force from being used, because force is restricting on the mind. So the government needs to extract that from society. And ultimately, that will lead to more production, and that will lead to economic growth. That'll lead to technological advancement. It'll lead to all of that stuff, because the human mind is free to think and innovate for itself. Thank you guys. I think that's all I have to say. It's a little shorter video today, but hope to see you guys in the next video. and peace.